that night at the Doma Santa Marta, when Pope Francis got up to return the toast, he looked at us with a twinkle in his eye, with which we're all now familiar, and he said, "May God forgive you for what you did." And as I've been saying in interviews this week, we don't want forgiveness at all. We rejoice in his pontificate, and we thank God for the gift that he is in the church. Did you ever think, now after simply a year, we'd have a pope that was Time Magazine's Man of the Year, Rolling Stone, Man of the Year. Rolling Stone having the Pope on the cover as Man of the Year? That'd be like Sports Illustrated having Archbishop Hepden me on the cover. How do we figure him out, everybody? Let me propose the soul of John Paul II, the mind of Benedict XVI, the heart of Francis. This is a pope that wants to wake up the heart of the church. When he came out of what they call the room of tears, after he says yes, and after he answers, "By what name will you be called?" he goes back to this little room off the side of the Sistine Chapel, where there's the 3 different sizes of cassocks, the new white cassock. We had passed them all, we Cardinals, on the way in. When I saw that there was no XXL, I knew I didn't have a chance. What are you laughing about? So he comes out, and then we're all supposed to start coming up to visit him, and all of a sudden I see him kind of dash down to the back of the Sistine Chapel. And I said, "Where's he going? Is he eager to get out of here?" I was, all right. But he had gone down. There were 2 cardinals, one in a wheelchair and one on a walker. And he immediately went down to them. Now, you might say, well, that's common courtesy. I don't have to tell you folks, common courtesy is most uncommon today, right? And here was a pope who had it spontaneously, naturally. It was just the first thing he thought of, and a beautiful God-given impulse upon which he reacted. We start coming up to give him our love and our allegiance. And by that time, the Sistine Chapel was open, and the people were coming in, and we were chatting with the attendants and asking questions. And we asked him, did the white smoke work? Because we didn't know. We had been locked up. We said, is there a crowd out there? And they said, yeah, there is. And we said, how long they've been waiting? All day. And what's the weather like? It's raining. And with that, we saw the Pope had greeted about 10 or 12 of us. And his ears perked up, and he said, it's raining out there? And there's a big crowd? And he said, yes, Holy Father. And he turns to us cardinals, he said, we're going to go back and have dinner together. I'll be able to see you guys later. I don't want to keep those good people waiting. And with that, he went out to the square. Now, once again, spontaneous, natural, sincere, simple, common courtesy, most uncommon today. It had affirmed what we cardinals had known, that here we have a man with a heart. This is a heart that breaks at tragedy. Remember, as he went to Lampedusa, where the boats of refugees from Africa had sunk. Remember how his heart broke and what he said. Remember the prayer vigil for Syria, which historians are already saying probably kept increased military intervention in Syria from happening. Remember that prayer service when his heart broke. This is a pope who has a heart like the most sacred heart of Jesus, that goes to the side of the road and encourages us, priests and bishops, to get out of the sacristy and to go to those in need. This is a heart that has dared us to dream and to dare. This is a pope who has a particular heart for the poor. I'm reminded of the great story in our church tradition of St. Lawrence, one of the most popular saints in Rome. And when the Emperor of Rome called him in and said, Lawrence, I want all the riches of the church. I want all the treasures of the church. You got 3 days to bring him here, or I'm unleashing a persecution. And 3 days later, the attendant went to the emperor and said, Lawrence is back. He's in the piazza, the Cardinal, in the courtyard. And the emperor says, did he say he brought the treasures, the riches of the church? He said, yes. When the emperor went to the balcony, he saw the beggar, the blind, the crippled, the homeless, the poor, the sick, the widow, the orphan. And he said to Lawrence, where are the treasures of the church? He said, these are the riches of the church. This is a pope who's not afraid to speak of a tender heart. On March 19th, the feast of St. Joseph was his first Mass as the new pope, and he gave a beautiful homily. For one, it was only 11 minutes long, which I sure liked, right? And I don't know if you remember the homily or not, but afterwards, I had one of those endless interviews, and it was with a rather prominent correspondent. You'd know her name if I would tell it to you, but she spoke to me personally, so I'm not. And she was in tears, and she said to me, Cardinal Dolan, I spend my life reporting on wars and famines, and violence and drugs and disasters and war. And she said, now I'm covering this man who just spoke about tenderness. And she said, I needed to hear that, and so does the world. Remember he spoke of tenderness? He spoke of St. Joseph and said, see how tenderly St. Joseph embraces his virgin wife. See how tenderly he holds his foster son, Jesus Christ. We should not be afraid of being tender with God as he is with us, tender with one another, tender with his creation, and tender with ourselves. This is a pope who's not afraid of speaking the tenderness of the heart. After his homily, I was sitting next to the Archbishop of Vienna, Cardinal Christoph Schönbrunn, who's one of the great intellectuals in the life of the church. He wrote the Catechism. And he, after the homily, that 11-minute homily when Pope Francis spoke of tenderness, he turned to me and he said, Tim, he speaks like Jesus. And I said, Chris, I think that's the job description. And my brothers, I would suggest that what we will see as his main mission is to restore the heart of the church. He tells us that the church is not some NGO. The church is not some cold institution. The church is just not another agenda. The church is not some ethical society. The church is a person whose name is Jesus, who has a heart. And the church is a family where we are welcomed and warmly embraced. The church is a family with a heart. We call her Holy Mother Church. God is our Father. Jesus is our older brother, our Lord and Savior. Mary is our mother. The saints, our older brothers and sisters. Here on earth, we have a Holy Father. Here on earth, we have a family, the church. Here on earth, we have what every other family has: birth in baptism, maturity in confirmation, forgiveness and reconciliation in confession, weekly, if not daily, nourishment in the Most Holy Eucharist, healing when people are sick. The church is a family, meaning the church has a tender heart. Now, Pope Francis has won a lot of accolades because he's no romanticist. He knows the church is a family, and he knows that the church can be a dysfunctional family. Is your family dysfunctional? Yes. Mine is, all right? If you don't think so, I invite you to Thanksgiving dinner next year. So our supernatural family, the church, Francis tells us, is dysfunctional. And the church then is always in need of reform. The church is dysfunctional because guess what? We are. I am. You are. He is, he'll tell us. All right? So when we come together, we're dysfunctional. The church itself is the spotless bride of Christ. Okay? So the church is pure. The church is noble. The church is good. But boy, her members got a long way to go. All right? And that's why Pope Francis, in restoring the heart of the church, often quotes that Latin phrase, Ecclesia semper reformanda, the church always in need of reform. You know, you've seen St. Patrick's Cathedral. It's under reconstruction. It's scaffolding all over the place. It's falling apart. It's dirty. It's cracking. The pews are splintered. The heat and the air don't work. The stained glass windows are falling out. The roof is leaking. It needs reform. It needs repair. It needs restoration. Last year, getting ready for Midnight Mass, which is nationally and internationally televised, the TV stations came and said, you know what, Cardinal, maybe we better not have Midnight Mass from St. Patrick's Cathedral because it's all beat up and under repair. And I said, are you kidding? We need to show this church more than ever. Not only because maybe people will send us money to help with the repair. But because the folks need to see that the church, with a capital C, needs the same kind of repair and restoration that this particular church with a small c does, and Francis would agree. He took the name of Francis after St. Francis of Assisi, because of his tender heart for the poor, but also because of the pivotal moment in the life of Francis. Remember in Assisi when he was at the dilapidated Church of San Damiano, remember? And he was there praying, and Jesus spoke to him from the beautiful cross that is still there. Now it's in the Church of St. Clare, and Jesus from the cross said, Francis, rebuild my church. Francis, rebuild my church. And so Francis went and got hammers and nails and paints and brooms and mops, and he cleaned up the church. He restored it. And then he was kind of proud of himself after a couple months and said, there you go, Jesus, I rebuilt this church building. And Jesus spoke again and said, Francis, rebuild my church. Church with a capital C. And Francis began the renewal, the reform, and the restoration of the church for which he is today renowned. And so we have with Pope Francis, the Pope named after him, who is doing it on steroids, as he's not to show us the heart. In his authenticity, in his charity, in his simplicity, he's walking the walk, okay? He's not just talking the talk, he's walking the talk, isn't he? He's a man so sincere and simple, with no personal agenda other than to preach Jesus Christ and invite people into the tender embrace of Holy Mother Church. My brothers, I sure appreciate you listening. You know what I've been trying to do? You picked a great topic today, be not afraid. And I thought, well, who could give us a great example about the confidence, the liberation that we need to keep our hearts from fear? And I thought, why not the last three popes? John Paul, who was courage incarnate, who taught us that a lack of fear, a confidence and a conviction flows from a soul burning with the life of Christ, the grace and mercy of Jesus within us. Who better to teach us than Pope Benedict XVI, who reminded us that the intellectual richness of the church, the tradition of our theology, the truths of our faith are well able to stand up to the scrutiny of a cynical, sarcastic, empty modernity. And who better than Francis, who is reviving the heart of the church to tell us, when all is said and done, it's all about love. Thanks, fellas. A blessed day and a blessed life.